Good morning, everyone. Welcome to BreezeTime with Kathy. Oh, it's getting to be fall, isn't it? Autumn, all those wonderful fall leaves beginning to change color. I can see it around here. It's something we didn't have down in Louisiana. I had never seen fall color that people talk about all the time. It just doesn't happen. The weather's It's hot and rainy all summer long, and hot, humid, and rainy all summer long, and then for about 4 months you get cold, humid, and rainy, and that's about it. And the colors are drab, and we just don't see it like you see up in the mountains around here. So I had never traveled very much when I got married to Chuck, and he asked me, "What did you want to do for our honeymoon? What would we like to do?" And I said, I'd like to go someplace I'd like to do something I've never done before. I'd like to see fall leaves. We were going to get married in the fall anyway. And I said, let's go someplace where we can see the leaves change. Well, in Louisiana, the nearest place to go was Gatlinburg. Gatlinburg was about a 10-hour drive. So it wasn't like it was right next door. But that's what we decided to do, and we made reservations. Oh, I hunted and hunted for just the perfect place. And I found an inn called the Buckhorn Inn, and they had cottages. They had a wonderful view of the Smoky Mountains, and I was just really excited about it. And it was truly very nice. We had a wood-burning fireplace in our cottage, and it was just lovely. Oh, the food was fantastic. I had soups I had never had before. I think an acorn squash pecan soup. I had never had anything like that before. And and a cranberry something or other soup another night. The food was delicious. Well, Chuck and I we're both outdoor people. We enjoyed that a lot. So what we wanted to do was what we didn't particularly care about going down the main drag of Gatlinburg with all the touristy things, but we did want to go into the mountains, into the park, and so that's what we did. I remember we got there. We got married on a Friday, on a Saturday. We got married on a Saturday, and then we drove for a few hours. We had a hotel somewhere, I don't remember where. It wasn't spectacular. But then we got to the Buckhorn Inn on Sunday evening. Well, on Monday, I had read, of course, Kathy, I had read all about Gatlinburg, and I knew that there were scenic drives and hiking trails. We wanted to do day hikes. We weren't big on anything much more than that. So the first thing, we got married October 10th, which made it very nice, October 10th, 10/10, easy number to remember. So neither one of us would forget our wedding anniversary. It made it very nice. Well, the first place I wanted to go was this big circular drive. It was about a driving trail. It was a one-way trail through a high mountain cove, which is like a mountain valley. And it was about a 5-mile drive, and it's called Cade's Cove. And maybe some of y'all have gone on that. They have some preserved historic buildings, a church, a couple of cabins, a few cabins. They have a mill that actually works, and some other things. It was really very fascinating. So that's where we headed out to on Monday. Well, guess what day? We got married on Saturday on the 10th, October 10th, and then Sunday was October 11th, Monday was October 12th. Well, I hadn't given it a second thought. It's Columbus Day. But down in New Orleans, we don't pay much attention to Columbus Day. I think because as a state holiday, they avoid it in favor of adding in holidays like Mardi Gras. So yeah, the banks are closed and federal government's closed, but you don't much think about anything else. I certainly didn't plan my time off around a holiday. Well, when we got to Cades Cove, it was bumper to bumper traffic for the whole 5 mile trail. We got there, boom, boom, boom. Now there was lots to see because there were all kinds of wild animals that we were able to see. We got out, we visited the cabins, and we got back in the bumper to bumper line. We hiked up to some different areas. We would see little day walks. We stopped at a church and walked through their cemetery, which was a nice old cemetery. Saw a couple of cabins. We stopped at the mill, and there was a place halfway through that had where you could buy lunch. So we ended up spending the whole day there because it took such a long time. It was absolutely wonderful, and we saw fox, and I remember seeing foxes, a big red-tailed fox with its bushy thing, and there were birds and other kinds of wildlife, of course, squirrels and things like that. And but we were coming back in that bumper-to-bumper traffic, and it was getting on towards sunset. After all, sunset comes a little earlier by the time you reach October. And we were on our way back. And the mountainside went up on this side of us, and then there was the big open cove right there with pasture land and grass, and I guess it was really very pretty. We'd seen some other, trying to think of what we saw. I know we saw turkey, we saw a few other animals, and then as it was getting towards sunset, we're in bumper-to-bumper traffic and we're stopped. And about 3 cars ahead of me, well, there's a bear jam. Yeah, what happened is somebody up there, they've seen some bear cubs, some bears, and everybody stops to take pictures of bears and to look at bears. They didn't get close or anything, but traffic had pretty much come to a stop. And we were just stuck there. There wasn't anything we could do because this was one way and it was only one lane on this road that ran around the whole big cove. It was like a 5-mile loop. And Chuck and I were just sitting there in the car, and lo and behold, the mountainside came down like this, and the cars were parked in front of us, and all of a sudden a stag jumps over about 3 cars ahead of us, jumps on the roof of the car, and the car about 3 cars ahead of us, and then springs off the roof and jumps down. He's headed for the valley, and behind him come about 12 other deer, and they all boom, chung, 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 and they're over car hoods and car roofs and car trunks and all over the place. Fortunately, we were back that was about 3 cars ahead of us. But man, talk about something to see. I'll never forget how impressed I was to see those deer just leap down and bound down toward the fields. I guess they were going to feed all night. Chuck said that they fed at night. They often grazed at night, and they were headed down, and they headed into the field. It was so impressive. It was so beautiful. But wasn't so good for the cars. And I heard people were out of their cars and they were looking. They had dents from deer hoofs on their roof and on the hood of their car and everything, and their trunks, and they would say, and one guy said, I don't know how I'm going to explain to my insurance company that a deer jumped on the roof of my car and caused this big dents and scratches, that I heard a deer jumped on my car. I imagine that was quite a conversation about that. But we got home, and it was very nice. It was cool enough at night, and we could build a fire in the fireplace, and we had this just 5-star meal in the evening in the inn. The food was so delicious. Breakfast was included, and it was wonderful. And we would sit there in the inn and look out across the terrace and see the mountains, just so impressive. And we had that time and we'd walk the grounds and cuddle up by the fire. We were on our honeymoon after all. I remember another day we went hiking. Well, we went on another drive. It was called Roaring Forks. Now, Roaring Forks was a little different. It followed a stream pretty much. And there were about 3 or 4 different houses along that stream, cabins that we got to see. I remember one of them was a typical dog trot cabin. That means that you had cabin here, cabin there, and there was a space in between. There was 2 sides of the cabin, one roof across. And the reason they called it dog trot, Chuck told me, was because you could run a dog could go right down the middle without ever going into the house. And that was a place that was used, the breeze would blow through in the summertime, and in the wintertime it was warmer there, and you could stack firewood or do anything, keep things there. And so we saw several different cabins. I remember and they called it Roaring Forks because there were rapids on this creek, and no matter where you were on this stream, it was always the sound of rushing water, and it was loud, and it really did roar. And I remember one of the cabins we saw wasn't a log cabin. It was built with clapboard on it, and it had been painted. It was painted white with green trim and a red door and red shutters. And the man who had originally lived there had painted it that color, and the reason he had is because those were the only 3 colors you could buy in the Sears catalog. But he was a very creative guy. It turned out that I don't know when he'd actually lived there, probably before the Civil War, when he lived there. He actually had a mill. He had a little grist mill, and that ran on a water turbine, a sawmill. He had a little sawmill there, and he was a carpenter. He was also the local preacher. He also used to make the coffins, the wooden the coffins. When anybody dies, he'd build their caskets, and then he'd put on his preaching suit, and he'd go and preach their funeral. He was quite creative, and to tell you the truth, I could see in that life that this man had in this house. There was, on one side, there was a big room that was used as the kitchen and the family room when you went downstairs. On the other side downstairs was a bedroom that was for the parents. And upstairs there was a wall up the middle, and the boys were on one side in the attic space, and the girls were on the other. And that's what it was. This one was a 4-room house. And I thought, yeah, I can see how people would live in this. With his mill, and he was creative. He was always apparently after the newfangled thing, which my husband was a gadget man. It was just really nice. We were going through the real deep forest there. It was very wooded, and the sound of the water. And even though it was a drive, and we had these tapes we could play that would tell us all about it. You could put the cassette. That was back in the days of cassettes. You could put the cassette into your car, and it would tell you to drive to this stop and that stop. Oh, it was wonderful. And the colors of the fall leaves were so beautiful. I had never seen anything like that. I remember getting out and just taking pictures of just being surrounded by golden leaves and shooting pictures up through the trees. I wish I can't put my hands on those pictures. I would have to scan them in order to show them to you, and I'm quite certain they're not as good as my mind's eye remembers them. Oh, but it was wonderful. And then we went on a couple of day hikes where we went walking. We went on a day hike we'd walk up to waterfalls. That was our favorite destination. I remember one of them was we walked up to we walked up to a waterfall, and then we walked past the waterfall, and the waterfall was so nice. Oh, I can't remember the name of that waterfall, but it was very nice. It was a walk, and you got to remember, I am a flatlander, and I'm not that good at walking up hills. Of course, this was walking uphill, but we took our time. We just went day hiking. And I remember going up to the waterfall, and there were people taking pictures, and even some people, the sun was shining that day, and there were people wading in the water, and some people were even trying to swim. And then we continued on up above the waterfall because there was a stand of virgin timber. I've never been out west. I've never seen the redwoods or the sequoias. But I really don't know if I could imagine anything more spectacular than that virgin timber. Trees so big around, I couldn't have, as far as I could get my arms, I couldn't get them around that tree. These were a stand of only about 8 or 10 of the virgin trees that were there. And to think that at the time Europeans came to America, almost all the trees were virgin timber like that. Huge trees, beautiful trees. And in our arrogance, we thought, there's so many trees, we'll never cut them all down. But of course, except for a few, I'm sure 99.9% of the virgin timber that was here is all gone. But there's a few places, and it reminds you of the glory and the beauty of the world God's created. Oh, it was so beautiful. We saw deer again. That was pretty neat. I remember being there in the trail, and I froze. A doe came out of the brush, and walked up behind us. Chuck and I froze. I had my camera. She got within about 8 feet of us as she grazed, and then she turned and looked right at me, and then bounded off. Yeah. We saw a fox. I saw a lynx. I was surprised. I didn't know they had lynx in that part of the world. I saw a bear. We saw quite a bit of animals. And then we walked up, and just after the virgin timber, we kept going till we were above the timber line. And there was nothing but this beautiful fields. There wasn't really anything blooming, but there was this interesting looking moss that seemed to have a silvery color to it. And it was quite nice. They say in the spring, which is something Chuck and I did do, we came back in the spring several years later, but that's a story for another time. But even so, in the autumn color, and we stood there above the tree line and looked out across the mountains, and you could see all the colors, the reds, the golds. It was just lovely, just beautiful. Then we did another walk. We did another hike. We actually went to place on the other side of the park, and Catalici. And Catalici was really impressive. And actually, if you remember, if you've ever read the story of Christy, who was Catherine Marshall's mother, or seen the television show they had on, maybe 15, 20 years ago, about Christy, that was one of the places. The story isn't set in Catalici, but Catalici was on the same circuit of several schools that Miss Alice ran. And actually, the school was still there, and they had a picture of what Miss Alice really looked like in the classes. And there again, it wasn't a circular drive, it was just a drive in and drive out. But Chuck and I went on a nice walking trail, and it was fun because there were some log bridges, and I had never seen a log bridge, but a big old log like this laid across, and they just had a handrail on one side, and you walked across the bridge. It was pretty amazing. And we really enjoyed that. But one of the nicest things we did was we went horseback riding in the mountains. I love horses. I think I've told you how crazy I was about horses when I was a child. How wonderful I thought they were, and how I tried to figure out a way to buy a pony when I was little. But the thing is that I did enjoy trail riding. And it ended up being just Chuck and I and a guide. And he was so full of information. And I have to admit that horse trail riding is even more fun than hiking. Well, for one thing, you don't get as tired. But for another thing, the horse watches the ground and you get to see the view. It was really, really special. The whole trip, that whole time was, of course, it was my honeymoon. I guess maybe that's why I remember it as being magical, but it was. So, you know, when I see fall leaves turning, I maybe don't remember anything from my childhood, but I remember that wonderful, wonderful honeymoon I had in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. And then we drove over toward Asheville on the other side of the mountains. We visited a farm, you know, a primitive homestead kind of thing with reenactors on it. And I think I mentioned to you, my husband, who was 25 years older than I was, he was raised in Mississippi. And it was funny to go to one of those pioneer homesteads because he didn't get electricity until he was about 13. And they didn't get a tractor until he was about 11. And actually his father died in 1965 and never had a telephone on the farm. But the thing is we'd look at all these things, and these reenactors are showing us this stuff from the late 1800s, early 19, from the 1800s and all, even the late 1700s. But I guess it wasn't quite that. But in the 1800s. But the thing was, even in 1930s Mississippi, if you had a farm and you didn't have electricity and you didn't have a tractor, everything you used to farm was pretty much not that much different than what they'd used 100 years before. So it was fun to see it through Chuck's eyes too. I have a film about that, which I hope to share with you at some point. A video about Chuck talking about that kind of stuff. But moving right along, we had a wonderful time. And I can't look at fall colors without thinking of that magical time in my life. I'm sure you all have memories that are triggered. It's funny how smells and sights and sounds and even the cool, crisp air can bring back memories. I hope the memories you have are as wonderful as the ones I do. And I appreciate you listening to me going on about what a wonderful thing it was to be in Gatlinburg in the mountains in 1992 for my honeymoon in the Smokies. I hope you can curl up to a little mental fire and remember and treasure your good memories, because it's really special. The times we share with the people we love are so important. You know, there's this, some poet wrote, or some writer wrote, why God gives us memories. God gave us a memory so that we could have roses in December. And He does. Isn't it amazing? When you think about wonderful things in your past, it might be slightly bittersweet. But over the years, the joy and touch of those times give richness to today. It really is a way to have roses in December. Until next time, God bless you.